Hello everyone, welcome to session 7 in the RIAK to the Limit series. Got another belter of a session coming your way. Thanks for your company. Just look under 40 seconds before we get going. So for anyone that isn't familiar with these sessions, my name is Rich. I'm the head coach and owner of RIAK Fitness. We're a coaching outfit, and you'll see adverts above kind of for our various services. We've got coaching, relationships, we've got these online sessions, and then we've also got our on-demand content as well, including our cycle seminars. Kind of our thing is all about teaching athletes to look after themselves, which we'll be doing a little bit today in the session. So here we go then. We go. So just on the warm-up, normal sort of setup on the warm-up, the 10-minute build. Now for any of you kind of real eagle-eyed people, you might notice this session looks rather familiar. We actually did a session very similar to this on session 2, on week 2 of these sessions. Okay, but with a big difference. So we've got the normal warm-up, we then got this rapid build section where we ramp up through the zones as a kind of way of warming up and kind of getting our fast twitch muscle fibers going and spinning up the legs. We then get into a nice long 10-minute cruise section before we get into the kind of the main sets. So when we did this in session 2, it was a sweet spot to sweet spot to VO2 max lift. Okay, so working from about 90% of FTP, then up to around 115%. This time though, the major difference is instead of sweet spot, we're going straight up to threshold. Okay, so I'll run you through those intervals in a little bit more depth. So we start off with, when we get after the 10-minute cruising period, where I'm just going to be talking about a couple of bits and bobs. We've got 4 minutes at threshold, 4 minutes at FTP, where we crank up to 3 minutes at 115% of FTP. So that's those first 2 blocks, each with 3.5 minutes of pure recovery in between. Spinning up the legs, and then same sort of setup as session 2. In that final block, we start with a tempo effort for 3 minutes, about 80% of FTP, then up to the threshold for 3, a 1 minute step up at VO2, 115% of FTP, and then we just finish it with a 20-second sprint. So the difference, a second difference between this session and the one we did in week 2, I'm going to get you to do most of it out of erg mode. Okay, so there's going to be a second challenge. Not only is it objectively harder, session 2 I think was about, I can probably just check now actually, session 2 was around 65% of FTP I think. Let me just double check. Yeah, 65% of FTP. This session we're up to 71. Okay, so this is the real kind of big stuff. We're now into the really tough sessions. Okay, so we've got 2 challenges. Firstly, it's just harder, higher power targets, being at threshold rather than sweet spot before we kick up to VO2 max. That VO2 max interval, by the way, is the same as it was in session 2, 115%, but also we're going to be doing it out of erg mode. Okay, not just yet, I will prompt you when to turn it off. It's going to be out of erg mode, so you'll also have to really concentrate hard on keeping your power consistent and hitting the power targets. Okay, so there's a lot going on. For now though, you can just chill out and relax. We're staying in erg mode. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's a conditioning tool that you can use if you've got a smart trainer or a smart bike, and basically it sets the flywheel of the trainer to want to spin at a certain velocity, And basically all you have to do is just pedal hard enough to get to that velocity, and you'll be putting out the specific power target. Okay, so it's a really useful conditioning tool, however can become a bit of a crutch. Okay, we can become a bit reliant on it, and in particular if you do any racing, it doesn't matter what level, you can become slightly over reliant on erg mode, and then when it comes to kind of producing power or hitting or pacing efforts in a race, your power can become a little bit sporadic. You can make your accelerations can become too aggressive, you waste energy basically. So it's always really important to mix up your sessions, do 7 sessions in erg mode, get that really great conditioning benefit, but then also do some sessions out of erg mode so that you can kind of keep your pedaling some good habits when it comes to kind of pedal stroke mechanics and high cadence and just holding power smoothly, because being able to hold power smoothly really is an important skill. Okay, you might hear coaches talking about it doing sessions or whatever, you know, try and hold the power really smoothly, be like a metronome. In fact, I'm mocking, but I use those sort of phrases regularly, so I'm basically mocking myself here. But the point is, it actually really matters, because if you're not able to kind of be consistent in your power delivery, it means essentially you're getting these big peaks and troughs in your power, you're speeding up and slowing down constantly, and every time you do that you're wasting extra energy. So being able to hit and hold a rhythm is actually a really good kind of efficiency and energy saving skill. So you do any kind of racing, doesn't matter how serious, doesn't matter what the type of racing, to a certain extent, any form of racing, you've got to be able to hit and hold power, build into efforts, and generally just kind of keep things steady. Okay, so that's kind of one of the parts of this session. Now though, you don't have to think about any of that. We're just going through the warm-up. We're now onto the penultimate step of the warm-up, just cruising, got up to around 68% of FTP right now. You'll see me just kind of pootling around. Eventually I'll be up to around 2 watts per kilo. I've already trained once and had our squad session today, so I'm saving my legs. It's also at the time of this session, for anybody watching this on demand, middle of the British summer. Well, we call it summer, but it's basically where it's just basically a season where it rains ever so slightly less, and you have to wear your jumper less. But we are actually on quite a hot day, so I've got my little. If I start to undo my jersey, don't freak out. It's just because I have to go down to the base layer. It's unbearably hot. Okay, so don't panic. Right, so we've just got 30 seconds of this penultimate step, and then we're up to the final step. And actually, it's an 11-minute warm-up. We just got one kind of random 3-minute step at the top, for no other reason than just what I did at the time I was creating this workout for some reason. Probably a mistake, but let's pretend there was a specific reason behind it. So just 10 seconds, then we're up to the final step, going up to around 72% of FTP, still in the zone 2, still in cruising mode, still kind of using fat for energy, or predominantly fat for energy. Hopefully not burning into those glycogen stores. So we're up onto the final step now. In terms of your leg speed, I'd like you well above 80 RPM now, at least 85 RPM on the cadence. And we're getting ready to go, because we've got just about 2 minutes and 40 seconds before we hit that kind of pre-main set, that kind of wake up set, where we're just ramping through the training zones, the power zones. Each one's a minute long, and I'm just going to encourage you to pick up your leg speed, pick up your cadence with each step, so when we get to the top, your legs are kind of whirring around Roadrunner style. Anyone that's too young to understand know what Roadrunner is, it was a cartoon with a coyote and what was Roadrunner? Anyway, too young to know, you won't care either. So, right, so just a minute and 48 seconds. When we get to the 10-minute cruising section, it's got a couple of topics I'm going to cover very briefly. First one is kind of a bit more about how we've changed this, kind of the ways you can create progression, but pretty much by using the same session as we have done and here. So here what we've done is we've stepped up that sweet spot, the sweet spot steps up to threshold, and then we're taken out of erg mode. Okay, but there's various different ways you can manipulate a workout to make it more difficult. I'm talking through those, and also in the second 5 minutes I'm going to try and cover a little bit about fueling and hydration. Okay, because as we are getting into these more serious workouts, you want to make sure you're properly hydrated and properly fueled. So more of that to come. Now though, 48 seconds, so let's just start to focus. Cadence is upwards of 85 RPM. We want to get ready to go. So I'll just talk you through this step build. Okay, so each step in the build is 1 minute. So we're going to start off with a minute at 85% of FTP at tempo zone 3 area, then 90% sweet spot for a minute, 100% FTP for a minute, 115% VO2 max for 1 minute. Okay, so it's not messing around. Okay, so it's 4 minutes of reasonable to very hard work to get to the top of the build. All right, so let's get focused. Few seconds. Let's ramp up the leg speed. Let's get it up to 90. Power's going to feed in, so we're going up to 85% of FTP. So we're a nice high leg speed to deal with it. Okay, and then once you're up to power, once the power's fed in, we're still in erg mode. Just relaxing the shoulders and keep the fluids coming on board if you can. You have plenty of time to drink during the 10-minute cruising period, of course. So you just keep sipping away. So leg speed will be 90 RPM. And then we're just going to basically add 5 RPM with each step. So 10 more seconds at 90 RPM. Okay, so we're going up to 90% of FTP. And now I want you to be at around 95 RPM. So let's increase that leg speed, let's increase that power. Keep it going, guys. Nice and smooth, nice and smooth. Got 30 seconds left at sweet spot. 90% of FTP, 95 RPM on the cadence. Last 2 seconds, then we're going up to FTP, 100% of your FTP. And I want you to be up to 100 RPM for this. Okay, so let's really get those legs going, really spinning them up. God, spin those legs out, try and relax your upper body. Try to avoid bouncing up and down. You want to keep yourself nice and soft in the upper body. It's going to help keep your bum planted on the saddle as you spin up the legs. 30 seconds, come on. One more step after this. You're going above 100 RPM in the next step, okay? Going up to 115% of FTP, up to VO2 max level. That's zone 5 if you use your training zones. Here we go then. So up to VO2 max, up to zone 5, 115% of FTP. I want your leg speed upwards of 100 RPM now. The target, as you can see, is 105 RPM, but let's just go really spin up those legs and deal with this power. Well, you're nearly there, guys, and we've got a long cruising period where you can recover. 30 seconds. Okay, last 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And relax. Okay, so we're back down to about 65% of FTP. Might take a little while just for your breath and your legs to come back to you, but just relax. Just relax. Plenty of time sitting here. Plenty of time to recover. So just chill out. Just give you a little bit more time just to recover a bit before I get into the couple of things I was going to talk about today. We try not to do too much kind of knowledge building in these structured workouts because, let's face it, you're usually too gassed to take in information. Our Monday assembly rides are where we try and kind of divulge information. Likewise, our cycle seminars, try to use those as an opportunity to educate riders, because that's kind of our thing as a coaching outfit. We're all about kind of developing knowledge, helping athletes to look after themselves. And one thing that might just help is just a little bit understanding a little bit more about how workouts can be manipulated to make them more difficult. So you can kind of just understand how progression can be kind of built in. So if you see if you follow a training plan and you see similar workouts cropping up a few times, you can kind of just look for how they're manipulated to see how they're trying to stress you. I think it can make a big difference. In fact, I think really you should be trying to understand the point of every single session, and every single session you do should have a specific purpose. If not, it can hurt your motivation. If it's just another workout, it's just another hard session, you want to know exactly what you're going to get out of it. But there's various different variables that you can manipulate to kind of create progression. Today, we've just increased the power on one of the interval sets. So the sweet spot efforts are going to be threshold efforts, and in about 5 minutes time I'm going to prompt you to turn erg mode off. So that's another way. So you're having to think about it, you're having to work and really concentrate to keep your power consistent to hit the power target. Okay, there's other ways, reducing the recovery period. So it's a 3.5 minutes recovery between the intervals. The next session time we do this, we can reduce that down to 3 minutes or something. Because fitness is basically defined as how quickly you can recover. Okay, so that's one way of manipulating it. We could extend the intervals. We could do more intervals. There's all kinds of ways you can manipulate it. And I think just being alive to how sessions are altered, you can start to see a bit more about their purpose, and likewise understanding their purpose full stop. So this session, we're kind of continuing the theme of lifting up to VO2 max, because it's a key skill, it's a key conditioning, a key fitness kind of asset, being able to get up to your aerobic threshold and hold it there and then pick up when the time comes. It's really important that you're able to do that. You do any kind of racing, or even if you're just riding out with your mates, and at the weekends it can get a bit crazy. You need to be able to lift. And also there's a more kind of physiological purpose to it. You want to hit both at and around your threshold, but also slightly above it. And that's kind of like the underpinning focus of these the limit sessions, is hitting that threshold and also hitting above it. we say like taking a sledgehammer to that FTP. And you can see this session we're repeating session 2 but making it harder. You know, it's a good way of seeing progression. So if you've done the whole series, you know, this is a big difference to session 2. You've already come a long way if you can get through this session unscathed, you know, and that should be motivating. Again, that is important. That's one of the reasons you want to understand what your session's about, so that you can be motivated in achieving the goal that's set for the session. So that's just a little bit about session manipulation and why it's important, and why it's important to understand, and why it's important to understand your sessions generally. And the second thing I just want to talk about is, as we're kind of getting into the really serious stuff now, it's super important that you approach things properly from a fueling and hydration perspective. So ideally, before a high intensity session like this, you would have eaten something, at least something small, just to give you some glucose to burn. In a session like this, you're going to savage your glycogen stores. So your glycogen stores are the storage form of glucose. It's the main energy source at high intensity training. At the moment we're using more fat, but as the intensity kicks up, you shift more to more glucose, and you've only got a very finite store of that. So you really want to make sure your levels are topped up before you do a session like this. Not going to go into fasted training. It's too complicated to cover in sort of 3 minutes. But yeah, make sure you're fueled. If you're within an hour of doing a session and you've forgotten to eat, or you just not had time, then have something more sugary so that it gets into your system. It's not going to have enough time to kind of give you a big insulin spike, because it's just going to be used straight away in the session. Okay, so don't worry too much about putting fat on, because again, if you eat sugary foods, you can get a big insulin spike, and then what happens is your body will push some of the glucose into your fat tissue. But you shouldn't need to worry about that when you're eating something just before a proper high intensity set like this, because you'll just blaze straight through your blood glucose levels, your glycogen. Okay, and then of course hydration, increasingly important. It's not very well appreciated by athletes generally, I would say, the performance effect that dehydration can have. And a set like this, particularly if you're perhaps training in a warmer climate, it's summer in the UK, as I mentioned earlier, you want perhaps something a bit more than plain water. You want a hydration drink, I would suggest, because you're going to be sweating buckets and you want to be replenishing that. Whereas plain water, because hasn't got anything to help it across your gut lining, it can just sit in your stomach and not really benefit you in pumping up your blood plasma levels. So you perhaps want a hydration focused drink. So an electrolyte drink, or what we call a hydration drink, which is basically got electrolytes and also a low carb concentration, sort of less than 4% carb concentration, because carbohydrate and sodium in particular are really good vectors for helping water across your GI tract. Okay, so taking your fueling and hydration seriously as you get further into this series, because the sessions are serious, they are big, and you need to make sure that you're properly fueled. And then just backing that up, it's making sure that you're mentally ready for the sessions as well. If you're kind of doing this straight after work, or I don't know, stressful situation, just take 10 minutes before a session just to sit still, stay off your phone, stay off your computer. Just taking 10 minutes before a session can really kind of change your attitude. If you're in quite a negative headspace, or you're feeling really tired because you've had a stressful day at work, just taking 10 minutes can genuinely turn that around. I have to do it all the time. I'm self-employed, which is always super stressful, and before I work out, I'll often just take 10 minutes, sitting still, not stimulating with technology or anything, just zoning out. Might even shut my eyes for a little bit, and it can make a world of difference between being ready for a session or not. So there you go, just a few top tips as we get deeper and deeper into this series. Right, now though, it's time to switch on. So I want you to start turning erg mode off if you haven't already. So you go to the sensors menu, the tab at the top right will be erg on, or green erg button. If you've got a smart trainer or smart bike, turn that erg off. That's in the sensors menu on the top right hand side. Turn that off, wait 10 or 15 seconds for it to kind of react, and then it's going to start to simulate the course. Now we purposely picked a course that isn't pan flat. It's not a difficult course by any means, but it's got little rises, and there again is another challenge. So you're going to have to really concentrate, use your gearing, and just generally kind of focus very hard to hit the power targets. So remember what we got: 4 minutes at threshold, 3 at VO2 max, and we're doing it all, doing the rest of the session with erg mode turned off if you've got a smart bike or smart trainer. Here we go then, guys. So up to threshold we go. Don't stress about hitting the target immediately, build into it. It is more difficult with erg mode off to kind of get up to level, but get that power going, build into it, and then once you're up to level, just check your cadence. We want your leg speed to be upwards of 90 RPM throughout the rest of these intervals, okay? So that's your baseline, 90 RPM. Other than the recovery intervals, you do not go below 90 RPM for the rest of the session, okay? So use that as your baseline. Once you got there, you got those two things sorted, and you're dealing with your gearing and just adapting to the course, start to relax, okay? So draw the shoulders away from the ears. We're into kind of time trialing mode now, all right? If you want to get aero to build some lower back stamina, then do it. Otherwise, just focus on keeping your cadence nice and high. As I said right at the beginning, speeding up and slowing down, it's going to cost you extra energy. So your goal should be able to keep it as consistent as possible. Okay, good luck, guys. Keeping that power going with a nice high leg speed, keeping it consistent. That's halfway through this threshold effort. 2 minutes to go, and then we're going to kick it up. Don't worry if you're finding this first interval hard. Your legs might have gone to sleep a little bit during the cruising period. Also, it does take quite a long time to get warmed up. It takes me at least half an hour before I'm rocking and rolling. So don't stress, just stay with it, do your best. Your legs will come to you if you're doing all the little things right. Not far off, a minute to go at threshold. There we go then, 60 seconds. Keeping it steady. Coming up on 40 seconds to go. Then we're going to crank it up 3 minutes, remember, at 115% of FTP, so this should feel like an 8 out of 10. We're going up to a 9. 30 seconds. Pure recovery after this next interval. So don't stress. Keep it nice and relaxed. Let's get ready to go. Okay, 10 seconds till we lift. So pick up the cadence a little bit, add a few RPM onto the leg speed, and get ready to feed in that heavier gear. Or at least, try and see what you can do within the same gear. Okay, so pick it up. Don't worry again about hitting the power target immediately. Whether it goes red or green is dependent on the average power over the interval, okay? So pick up the effort, that leg speed. Again, baseline of 90 RPM, but you should be closer to 100 RPM right now. That's our goal. It's going to help produce power more smoothly and consistently if you've got a nice high leg speed and you're keeping it consistent. Can't stay strong. 115% of FTP, well above 90 RPM, close to 100. Just got 2 minutes of hard work to go, then you've got some lovely pure recovery. Approaching halfway. There you go, come on, double down. Let's finish this off, keep that leg speed nice and high. You can do this, keep it going. Approaching the last minute. Here we go then, last push. 60 seconds, come on guys. "45 seconds left of this VO2 interval. You're so close now. Just keep driving it, get your head down, leg speed up. Let's go. "20 seconds to go, you're in the final drive for the line now. No worries about finishing the effort, you're there, come on. Push it all the way. Last 2 seconds. And relax, okay, good. Keep the legs spinning. Try to avoid the workout pausing. Just relax, spin up the legs. Get your breath back. So we're out of erg mode, so don't stress too much about hitting the recovery targets, okay? Particularly initially, you're just gonna be dying 1,000 deaths, deadly, and get somewhere near. Okay, so really well done. That's basically round one done. You've got another round of that. So get through this next round, and honestly, you're dreaming. This next round will be tough, really tough. But then once you get through that final block of efforts is much more manageable, trust me, okay? So remember that final block, you got tempo, then threshold, a tiny little burst at VO2 max before a finishing sprint. Okay, and then that final build, we're kind of trying to replicate the craziness at the end of a race, essentially building up to that final sprint, so you're on the edge and then finishing it off. Okay, so it's much easier though, in my opinion at least, albeit it's at the end of a session, it's much easier than these brutal threshold to VO2 max lifts. Okay, these are about as tough as it comes in terms of training. All right, but you got to think positively. We talked on a few occasions about some of the things that you can do to help kind of keep your a positive mental attitude and to help you through a tough ride. One of the things I often do is kind of imagine it in a context. So imagine I'm racing someone in my head. And it just kind of gives you that extra boost You know, just imagine you got someone on your wheel and you're trying to drive them off. You're putting them into the hurt locker and you're trying to lock them in there until they crack. You know, just imagine these little silly little things. Pick your favorite pro rider and stack yourself against them. You know, it sounds silly, I know, but it honestly really helps. It's just about having something positive to focus on rather than kind of the burning sensation in your legs or the fact that you're struggling to breathe. Yeah, it does help you. It gets the old adrenaline going, and that adrenaline is the best performance enhancer known to man. For now, just relaxing another 45 seconds, and then we go again. So last kind of fluids going on board, I would say. And then we're going to get going again. So it's a repeat of the previous rounds, 40 minutes at threshold, 3 at VO2. Another pure recovery section, and then that final block at the end is, I would say, considerably easier. It's still tough, don't get me wrong, it's hard work, but it's nowhere near as brutal as these threshold to VO2 lifts. So just get through this interval and you should be able to finish the session off. Okay, so let's get ready then. Just picking up the leg speed. Remember, we want to be above 90 RPM when this interval hits. Okay, so up to 90 RPM at least as a baseline. Just building into it. Don't stress about hitting on the button in terms of power. You might need a, particularly if you kind of dropped into an easy gear, you might need a minute or two just to get it going again. So get yourself up to speed. And once you're up to power and leg speed, just tell yourself to relax, draw the shoulders away from the ears. Just going to help open up the chest a little bit. Try not to ride like this as well. It's quite tempting when you're working really hard to drop your head, but just what it can do is just compress your airways. Okay, just try and keep your head in sort of neutral. You know, looking up like that, it's going to strain your neck. I know this is all kind of the minutiae of riding, but kind of keeping your head relaxed means your airways are going to be relaxed as well, and definitely not constricted at least. I catch myself doing it all the time, riding like this, and I lift my head and suddenly I can actually breathe again. It's so silly, it's just an unconscious thing I do. Do it with running as well. And swimming actually. I do it all three. I did it yesterday in the pool. Had to lift my head a little bit. Just noticing this stuff can help. Anything to kind of help get through sets like this. Come on guys. So we're almost halfway through the threshold interval already, okay? So keep positive. Feed that positive messages, imagine the context, whatever you want. Just get yourself revved up. Let's smash through this interval, smash through this block. Okay, you're approaching the final minute threshold. Just check that leg speed. Make sure it's well above 90 RPM. Be strict with yourself. You allow that leg speed to drop too slow, you'll be pedaling inefficiently, pushing too big of a gear, and it is going to fatigue you more quickly. 30 seconds, come on, you're so close. Get ready to lift it. As I say, this block is the hardest. Get through this and you should be able to finish off the session, no problem. Right, let's get ourselves revved up. Here's the big one, come on. 10 seconds, pick up the leg speed. Let's get ready to do battle. Remember, leg speed high throughout this. This is where the real culprit. Here we go. Okay, lift that level, lift that leg speed. Do not get stuck into pushing a big heavy gear and grinding your way through it. Stay on the button. It will save energy in the long run. Hey, well done, guys. Come on, push, push, push. 115% of FTP should feel like a 9 out of 10 effort with a nice high leg speed, closer to 100 RPM than 90. Just drilling this in, guys. Just coming up to 2 minutes of hard work to go. Then another beautiful, pure recovery sector. Okay, that's the halfway point, just 90 seconds of hard work. Then you get to recover. Come on, guys. Stay with it. Imagine that context. Imagine you're driving up the Stelvio or something. You know, you've got Vingegaard on your wheel, or you got, I don't know, Annemiek van Vleuten or someone on your wheel, and you're just smashing them to pieces. They're about to give up. You've still got another minute of pure hard work left in your tank, and you're just going to turn them inside out. They're going to beat you, they're going to have to earn it. So come on, guys, rev it up, finish this off. Okay, to the last 30 seconds, so we're pushing for that line now. Staying on it. 20. Ten seconds, come on, you're nearly there. 2, 1, and relax. Well done, guys. Okay, there you go. You're into your wonderful recovery interval now. So just spin up the legs. Don't worry too much about the power target. Just make sure you're spinning up your legs. Don't want to kind of in the 60-70 RPMs. Get your leg speed back above 80 as soon as possible. Spinning up, get the fluids back on board. Remember what I said earlier about, don't worry if you're not doing it in this session, but kind of in future really hard sessions, having a hydration focused drink rather than just plain water, so that you're kind of getting the benefits of those fluids going in. Because the problem, if you're just having plain water, it might not get into your system quick enough to help kind of cool you down, or to help kind of pump up your blood plasma levels. All right. Various concoctions out there. Just remember, if you're going for a hydration drink rather than a pure electrolyte drink, you want a low carb concentration, so not kind of the typical sort of sports drinks where it's usually kind of a 6 to 8% carb concentration. You want something sort of around 4% or lower. Okay. Just a couple of minutes. Spinning up the legs now, so hopefully you're at and around kind of the recovery target now. As I say, don't stress about it too much, it's just about kind of getting you going. If you relax too much though, your legs can kind of slip into like a pure recovery mode. Can be hard to get them going again. Sort of cafe legs is what we call it, if you relax too much. So you do want to keep them spinning upwards of 80 RPM. So that's staying awake. But guys, we've got this last block of intervals. Let me run you through it one last time. Okay, so you have got, the first one is nothing to worry about. You got 33 minutes, not 30, 3 minutes at 80% of FTP, so that's going up to that tempo zone 3 area. You've got 3 minutes there, then 3 minutes back up at threshold. Then just 1 minute of VO2 max, you'll be here, happy to hear. And then we're finishing it off with a sprint. So all of this again out of erg mode. This is basically replicating a final sprint build in a race, in a crit or an e-race or something. All right, so have that in mind as you go through it. That's the purpose. Particularly if it's a crit that's kind of just rolled around together. The last sort of 5-10 minutes gets hairy. It starts off with a general kind of lift in pace, and if you're good at positioning, you can save a lot of energy, which is kind of what we're up to with the tempo effort. But then there comes a point where it just starts to fall apart. You're chasing wheels, you're ducking, you're diving, you're whirring your way through, and that's kind of when you're more at a threshold level. Then the VO2 max effort is where you're kind of building up in that final lap, getting ready for the sprint. So here we go, up to tempo, about 80% of FTP. Should feel like a strong effort, shouldn't be working super hard. Okay, leg speed wise, again, remember that baseline, we want to be upwards of 90 RPM whenever we're not in a recovery effort. So get that leg speed going. Just got this final block of the session, and then you're done. So stay with it, stay focused. Don't let your mind drift. Keep it positive. Approaching first minute down. So we should be rolling pretty steadily as we come to the halfway point through this tempo section, this 80% of FTP section. Just FYI guys, if you're unfamiliar with some of this terminology, we do have a jargon buster on our website. We also have a training zones chart. So you just have to go to the training sources section on the RIAK online coaching or on demand page. The training resources are repeated on each of those pages, and you can find those training charts, and you can also find an article on there called To Erg or Not to Erg, which goes more into erg mode if you're interested. Probably not right now. You probably just want the session to be over. But let's start getting focus. Really kind of revved up and ready to go. So we've got 50 seconds, 5-0 at tempo. Then we ramp up to threshold for the final time. And we start to give it the beat. So imagine that context. We've got maybe, let's say, I don't know, 3 laps to go, or maybe 2, yeah, 3 laps to go. Just trying to think about my local crit course. Yeah, maybe, let's say 3 laps to go. Let's just shorten it a little bit. But this is where it starts to get serious. 20 seconds, so let's get ready to rev the power up. We should still be above 90 RPM. Getting ready to feed in a big gear or exploring this gear some more, see where it takes us before we shift down into a heavier one. Always good to do it that way. So here we go, lift up the leg speed, see what we've got left in this gear. If we're just spinning up too much, then we drop into a heavier one, but all the time keeping the leg speed well above 90 RPM now. Let's finish this off, guys. 3 minutes at threshold, 1 at VO2, and then we're gonna finish with that world-ending sprint. Reverse the Earth's rotation and finish this off. Okay, up to power now. Hopefully up to leg speed as well. Then just relaxing the shoulders. Approaching the first minute down. 2 to go. Come on, guys. Halfway through this threshold sector, so steady as she goes. Try and stay as relaxed as possible. Keep that leg speed as high as possible. We're nearly into the end game now. Just over a minute, then we set up that final sprint. So imagine we're just flying around now. People are flying out the back of the group. You're staying in there. You're ducking. You're diving. You're following the right wheels. You know who the big hitters are. You're staying on them. You're not going to let them go, but at the same time, you're just doing what you need to conserve energy, keeping your leg speed up. You're not responding to attacks too aggressively. You're saving, keeping your powder dry until we get into that final sprint build. "30 seconds. Then all hell's gonna break loose. Let's be ready for it." "10 seconds. Keep the hammer down. 3, 2, 1. Okay, the big hitter's going to drive on now. Let's stay with them. 1 minute at VO2 max. Only you're into sort of the back straight. There's going to be a few corners, and then the sprint. Let's stay on them. Let's stay on that wheel. 115% of FTP for 40 seconds. Cadence is well above 90, closer to 100 now, if not above. Really revving this up. Okay, 20 seconds. So we've got a long sprint ahead, 20 seconds it's going to be, okay? Someone's going to open up way too far in advance. But we're going to stay with them and we're going to overpower them. Ready? Let's get ready, guys. Get ready to drop into that big sprint gear. 3, 2, 1. Let's finish this. Come on, guys. Push, 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 push. Halfway, we're pulling out from their wheel. We're going to drive for the line. We're going to beat them there. Come on, come on. Let's go, let's go. All the way to the end. 3, 2, 1. And relax. Good, good, good. Well done. Just spin up. Keep the legs turning over. So our goal now with the cool down is just to chill out a bit. Just to give ourselves a bit of a reprieve. Just flush out some of that lactate that's accumulated in our muscles. This is a big set, guys. Make sure you have a stretch after this. Head to our website again to the training resources section. There's stretch routines in there. Okay. Because you're going to build up a lot of tension through this. You want to relieve some of that tension by having a good old stretch. Get a high protein meal on and get hydrated. This one is if you've not been before experiencing a sweat fest, this one you're really going to need the fluids on. Okay. And if you're planning on training again today on the same day, make sure it's at least 6 hours between your sessions, but also make sure you're restocking your glycogen supplies, so getting the carbohydrate on after the session. That will also, if you're drinking at the same time, will help kind of rehydrate you as well. Just remember, sodium in particular and carbohydrate, they're water's best friend in terms of helping you to hydrate. All right. So it's just 90 seconds spinning out the legs. Don't stress too much out the power target. There you go, guys. That's session 7. The next session, session 8, is a slightly different one. Okay, it's still tough, but we're kind of just taking a break from the whole lift to VO2 max kind of theme. We basically just got multiple threshold sprint rounds. Okay, so we're going to be hitting both your FTP, your aerobic threshold, but also we're going to be doing some anaerobic work. Okay, it's also always good to work on your top end power when you're trying to lift your FTP or build your power profile. Got to do some anaerobic work as well. How much you do and how regularly you do it, of course, depends on your focus. Next week we're just going to mix it up a little bit with some sprint action. So just last 30 seconds, keep the legs turning over, keep the fluids coming on board, and just take a moment for yourself really. Try not to rush off into doing something stressful. You just finished one high stress scenario, try not to rush into the next one. Give yourself a bit of a mental break as well. There you go, guys, really well done. Excellent set, that. And if you got through that unscathed, that is progression demonstrated right there off session 2. We lifted it up and you were equal to it. So really well done, guys. Have yourself a good rest of the day wherever you are, and look forward to seeing you on the next one. Well done.